because I only had a camisole on, so I didn't think that was appropriate. But that is just a testament to how cared for. So I wanted to just acknowledge that. Okay. Woo! Yeah. So, all right. So I'm glad that we weren't right after lunch, right? So we had a minute to like really get juiced up and energized for this last panel for today. First, I want to set a little bit of context. Okay. And I do this because I think it's important to know sort of a few things. One is this conversation on reproductive justice. So this is going to be a conversation lightly facilitated or moderated by me. And it is set in a framework that is US based. I mean, you'll hear from Viviana, but reproductive justice itself is US based. And the other thing is, for those of you who don't know what reproductive justice is or means, in 1994, as a response to the Clinton administration, 12 Black women came together and created a framework, an approach called reproductive justice, which is a lens in a way to look and analyze things. So I want to think of you, pretend you're in a doctor's office, right? And so, you know, I don't know, some of you may be blessed with 20/20 eyesight. I am not. I'm very myopic. But they'll do this. So those of you who've been in that office, they'll put a lens on and put another lens on and put another lens on. And everything then starts to come into clearer focus. So I want to invite you to think of reproductive justice as a lens, right? So because reproductive health, which I'm sure everyone knows about, it's about services, access to contraception, birth control, abortion, reproductive rights, right? So we have two lawyers here. That's about laws and policies. Those two things did not take into account women of color, and today trans and non-binary women of color, and their specific needs about what it means to have access or not have access, what it means to have laws and be protected by laws, right, or harmed by laws. So reproductive justice was an answer, an anecdote. It is, so reproductive organizations are led and run by women of color as a response to two things, to sexism, which we all know about that. So the gender lens, that's one of the lenses that we put on, right, in this room, and misogynoir, right? So anti-Blackness against women, Black women in particular, which is a pernicious poison, right? Misogynoir, right? Which is just strange because it's such a beautiful word. It is so horrible, right? So that's the context that I want to just set to get everyone up to speed. Oh my God, I got so excited, right? Hot and bothered that I dropped my notes. Okay. So we're going to enter into a lightly facilitated conversation, giving you that context and framework. And we're going to talk for about 25 minutes. And then we're actually going to join you on the floor again for about another 25 minutes to actually talk and think together about how we can change the world. In Heather Booth's words, how we can organize with love at the center. Okay? All right, guys, ready? All right, here we go. All right. So I am inviting these two esteemed guests here with me to put on your lens, that reproductive justice lens. So appreciate you joining this movement. And tell me, what is the landscape right now, and what does it mean to you when in your work that you do, or to you as an individual when you put on that RJ lens?
Is this on? Hi, I'm Brina. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. What an inspiring and educational day so far. I am here in my capacity as a board member of NARAL Pro-Choice America, which is not a reproductive justice organization. So let me actually set the stage from our organizational history and worldview and momentum in this very particular moment in history that we are in. NARAL was founded in 1969, before Roe versus Wade, to organize to create abortion rights access. And we have a long and complicated history, like a lot of legacy organizations that have lived through several generations and of culture and politics change. And where we are now is in a place of deep commitment to our organizing roots and thinking about what it means to be a national mobilizing force in the reproductive freedom space. Our mission is to create reproductive freedom with equitable access, abortion access for everybody in this country, which is obviously a very high bar to meet in this moment in time. But we, were historically one of the white-led feminist organizations that has had years of work to do to undo the roles that we had played and continue to play, because we all live in this world, in white supremacy and with anti-Black and other racism within our own movements and the politics and our partnerships. We have done lots of work with our board, with our staff, with our membership, and continue to work in partnership in lots of different ways to live what we really see as our current commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-Black, becoming an anti-racist organization and movement and community of members who are organizing to really build political power to create reproductive freedom in this country. And another way to kind of situate us in the landscape and some of the work that I've done, both as a board member and a philanthropist, but also in my political advocacy and political operative life. And really one of my calls to action to everyone in this room is that within the reproductive health landscape, within the reproductive freedom landscape, within the reproductive justice framework, there is so much work to do, right? And part of what we like to say at NARAL is that we do not operate and we do not litigate. We love our partners who do. And as a donor too, it is so important to be funding and supporting people who are providing direct service and abortion care under increasingly challenging and sometimes illegal circumstances in this country. And we have to work with and support our litigators who are in the courts trying to protect and promote our freedoms. But we've got to do the organizing work to build political power and to engage in advocacy, to engage in election work, and to both hold anti-choice politicians accountable and to change the dynamics in state houses and in Congress to be creating laws and policies that truly protect our freedoms and will promote equitable abortion access for everyone in this country. And as donors, historically, we kind of don't always see the whole board, and there is so much opportunity to be focused on political power building and on organizing in addition to service access and litigation, and that all of those things we kind of need to be thinking about together to promote a truly equitable and free country.
Thank you. Not to break anything up here. Okay, thank you. And before I start, I just want to say thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be with both of you, and it's an honor for me to get a chance to speak to all of you. I'm really excited. And I want to kind of answer the question, and we start off talking about it's a U.S. context. And so there's no way I can do this except for explain like me and my role and what we've done.
So clarification, the term reproductive justice.
Correct.
I was contextualizing it in the US.
Yes. Thank you. And I'll work with it. Give me a minute. I'll get there. I'm trying to warm up. A little nervous. Okay. So I had the privilege of studying in the United States. My parents were exiled from Argentina in the 70s. They left the coup. And so I had the opportunity to study in the United States, and I actually studied law here. And then I had the opportunity and also the privilege to start an organization that worked on women's and girls' rights, including reproductive rights, reproductive equity. And I had the chance to benefit from the women that you are speaking of that brought that lens forward, that taught the people in this country what that lens is. And I'm kind of here to tell you that that has gone way beyond the United States. So just the way that Kimberly Crenshaw coined intersectionality, and now all the work women's rights and feminists do around the world is intersectional feminism. And it all started with Kimberly Crenshaw coining that word, understanding it and explaining it. Something similar has happened, and not everywhere. It's not like all organizations around the world, just like here, it hasn't happened everywhere. But there is this understanding about the essential inclusion of that lens. And so I, in doing my work, had the privilege of learning both from that and from what I understood to be some of the mistakes that took place in the way that some of these rights were won. And some of it, it's very contextual. It's all stories you all know. But one of the things I thought about as the organization I was running with my colleagues were litigating a case in Colombia in 2006, where abortion was completely prohibited, even to save the life of the woman, is that we knew that we didn't want to litigate the right under privacy. Because when you do so, I mean, it's not like I don't believe in privacy and the importance of it, but when you do so, we all know what happens. And it's always the poor women who don't have access that then aren't able to get the care. And so constitutions are different everywhere in the world, so you can't do the same thing everywhere, but we litigated and won the case using non-discrimination, using the right to health, using public health arguments. And that was possible because of an understanding of this importance of this lens. And then you have to take the lens and you adapt it to the different places where you work. And when we won the case in 2006, and I also understood that that was the beginning, not the end, because having a legal framework is necessary, but insufficient. Because even here, before Dobbs, a lot of people couldn't access abortions because they can't pay for them, they can't travel, all the things we all know happen. And so, yes, we've got to get the law back, but we've got to remember that whatever the framework is, if you're really using this lens, you've got to keep thinking about who's still not accessing, even when the framework is good, which is, I think, your point exactly about the context, right? And so I kind of wanted to bring it back in the landscape because I kind of wanted to say, like, it's amazing because this lens really, for me, it's allowed me to think about the work differently. It's allowed me to think about the work and work differently in a lot of countries around the world. In Latin America, I've worked in some countries in East Africa, and some countries in Europe, always focusing on access. And now kind of my message is, can it be time for the US to think about what the learnings are from other places around the world? So I come from and work in a region where there is a green wave. The green wave is that there's been a lot of countries that have decriminalized abortion in the last 4 or 5 years. Colombia, they went even further. There was a case that Women's Link and others participated in which abortion was taken out of the criminal code the first 24 weeks. And the future is no abortion in criminal codes. What's it doing there in the first place, right? I think that is the wave of the future. Argentina, Mexico. And then during all this time, I've worked with amazing advocates in the global South that no matter what the framework was, we worked on how could women and girls get access anyway. And so my invitation in thinking about the landscape is, can we open up, even though I understand we're talking about the US context, reproductive justice was born here, and all the credit is due to who gave birth to that idea, pun intended. And can we now look up and think that what it means to be global and what it means to learn from others? And the US has had this amazing possibility to export amazing ideas. Can we now import some of these amazing ideas?
Right.
Yeah,
I'm going to
absolutely.
keep riffing
Yeah.
off that because when we got to know each other a little bit to prepare for this panel, Viviana and I had kind of an interesting back and forth about the global nature of misogyny. And right, misogyny is a global phenomenon. And so the history of controlling women's bodies, and particularly certain women's bodies, and controlling access to contraception and to abortion, criminalizing pregnancy and abortion, and the ties historically to the other forms of rises in authoritarianism, and how controlling women's reproductive freedom for everybody has always been a tool of authoritarians. There's a lot of global trends and histories to inform the work that we do now. And also, as someone who's much more of a US politics and policy practitioner, I spent a lot of time and encourage us all to think about where and how America is also does have its exceptional history. And there are things both about the American Constitution and the American experiment and the history and legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and white supremacy and how it structures our politics that are intimately tied up with misogyny in this country, with anti-Semitism in this country, and in what our current abortion politics and landscape and reproductive health service landscape looks like. And part of the work, thank you, I would say part of the work that actually NARAL has really invested in the last couple of years, in part in partnership with and kind of listening to advice from some of our reproductive justice partners, is taking responsibility, especially for the white women in the membership, but for all of us, I think, living in America, to really understand the history of how we got here. And one of the most pernicious political myths in this country is that we are a deeply divided country about abortion, because it is just such a complicated moral issue that people have really deeply religiously held beliefs on. That is just not true. The vast majority of Americans from every demographic, including every religious demographic, do not, believe in the fundamental freedom of reproductive freedom and do not think that the government should be making decisions that are deeply personal, that are fundamental to our bodily autonomy, and that speak so intimately to our freedom and our own personal destinies. And it was part of the work of the anti-abortion movement to convince the dominant culture that this is a stigmatized medical procedure that we should not be talking about, and that it is a politically divisive issue, and that the people who are, quote, pro-life are really moralistic, ideological people whose religious perspective should be valued. Now, I say this as a Jewish woman who really believes in the First Amendment, right? And the freedom to exercise my own religious beliefs in this country. But what the anti-abortion movement in this country actually is an outgrowth of the segregation movement. A lot of the evangelical world was actually in support of Roe versus Wade when the decision came down, and it was a couple of years later when they finally lost the school desegregation battle and they needed something to organize around, that they chose to flip their position and come out against Roe versus Wade and kind of join the burgeoning radical right movement that was developing in the late 70s, early 80s to elect Ronald Reagan and kind of create a culture war that was not really about the medical procedure that is abortion, but was about preserving and protecting the rights of a very small number of people in this country in the face of a changing America, and advancing a very specific white Christian patriarchal agenda that controls women and people of color in order to uphold that old model and to reinforce a very narrow lifestyle and family structure that was white Christian patriarchal heteronormative. And that's why this is a movement that is anti-science. They're trying to ban contraception. They're trying to ban IVF. They're trying to criminalize and punish women, and in particular, women of color, and in particular, lower income women, right? Because it is about a very narrow extremist worldview that is deeply retroactive, but is really connected to so many strains in American life and American politics. And so one of my other calls to action for the day, and then I'll bring it back, is that NARAL published a book and issued a podcast a couple of years ago called The Lie That Binds, that traces the history of the anti-abortion movement and really unpacks where and how abortion politics is deeply connected both to misogyny and to white supremacy, and it kind of uncovers how abortion was used as a wedge issue and a Trojan horse to be pushing a deeply white supremacist agenda. And I just encourage you all, the podcast is fabulous. Like, part of our work is to kind of keep learning and have that history informs the giving and the activism that we do.
Woo, right? A lot. Amazing. Amazing. Thank you.
Can I say
So
one?
there are two things that I want to lift up, right, from what I just heard Brianna share. One is this notion and belief about fundamental human rights, right, on the one hand, and a group of people, particularly Black women and men in the United States, who were not seen or viewed as human, right? So, so this is still an issue that we face today, and how we treat those who we don't even see. So I'm asking you to see from not just your eyes, but take those lenses and place them on your hearts. Place them on your hearts, illuminate your souls, and really see, right, what's going on, for sure, okay? The second thing has to do with faith. So when I first started working in the reproductive justice movement in 2006, there was a expectation, I guess, because I was Jewish at the time. I converted to Judaism. It's a different story. You can ask me later. There wasn't an opening or a space for me to talk about reproductive justice from a Jewish perspective, right? So we need to start wrapping up before we join you on the floor. But I want to, I guess, invite and ask. So as a feminist and as a Jew, so I'm glad the last panel started talking about this, but what does it mean to be Jewish and a feminist doing this work?
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually not going to answer your question. I'm sorry. Just because I want to say one thing and then I'll let you answer the question. And I have a lot of thoughts on this question that you just asked, but I want to say one thing because it's a little bit of a request and it's going to seem like maybe a little bit radical. I think it's not. So I think one of the things we need to start doing urgently, like today, and with all respect. So I think we've got to stop talking about people that are trying to shut down rights as anti-abortion. They're just anti-rights. And I think we need to remember that we are pro-life. We are pro-life of women and girls and people. They have won the communication war on this on us, and all of us are, they've won the communications on this. And it's like, we're all walking around with all the best intentions talking about anti-abortion, rights, family. We're pro-family. You just have to be able to pick whatever family you want. Yeah, anti-choice. And so I really think like if we could consciously make a decision to reclaim some of that language, in addition to everything else that they're asking us to do and putting on the lens, but I really think we need to stop talking about them as anti-abortion. They're anti-rights. They're anti-rights. So thank you. That's all.
I mean,
Sorry.
actually, most of the time I call them like the tiny extremist minority. They happen to control the Supreme Court and a bunch of other really important, institutions in this country. And they understand, they know that they are an extremist minority, that they cannot win in popular opinion, that they cannot win under a truly like open democratic process, which is why the anti-abortion specific forces are in lockstep with the folks who are contesting elections and suppressing votes because they know they cannot win in public, right? The majority of the American population is pro-freedom, right? And that this is fundamentally a question of like what our rights and freedoms are. And of course, they're hypocrites too, because if anyone is pro-life or pro-family, we would be locked in arms together working on contraception access, health insurance access, support for women and families through childcare and healthcare. Right. I mean, just the list is quite long, and that is not what these forces are doing. I'm trying to, sorry, I want to pause and pivot back to your question. I mean, I think we are, I'm doing a lot of different kinds of work at this moment in my life and in this country's history that is, feels very raw. It is really, right? I know a lot of people in this room feel this, right? We have been facing some like very dark demons within our own country and some real moments, some very stark fault lines. And I have been, I think, doing what a lot of activists and donors are doing, trying to kind of keep myself centered and take care of myself in that process and thinking about how I show up every day, able to do any of this work as a woman, as a feminist, as an American Jew who also has Israeli family. It's like that's a whole other different story in this moment and this week. But, and I am very both privileged and freaked out, for lack of a better term, in this moment in history, as you know, as a white person with all of the privileges that come with that, as well as living in Jewish community in my life and in my family in a period of rising anti-Semitism and rising violence against Jews, and also rising political violence. Like to me, it's every day. It's all this like very complicated stew that is both very rich and informative. And I try to draw strength from, because I think all of us here are kind of engaged in a practice of tzedek, of righteousness, right? To be like looking at the dark spots and trying to figure out where the light is and what we can do to spread the light and the love instead of being mired in the darkness. But it is kind of a daily practice to kind of bring that energy and perspective.
So I
That
want
this community really helps.
Thank you. So I actually want to just share a quick thing I learned the other day, which surprised me so much about our tradition, the Jewish tradition. And this is about when life starts, right? So I was taught that for Christians, right? The soul enters at conception, right? But for Jews, the soul enters after the baby's born. I was like, wow. I was like, whoa, that's so what, I guess this is an invitation, right? Though, to have conversations that are explicit, front and center, about how Judaism intersects with why and how we do what we do. There's a rich tradition to draw from, and I'll close with this. I mean, I think there's definitely obviously a reason, right, why Jews have historically not been vocal about our faith, right? For good reason. Judaism has been something that's either behind the closed doors of a sanctuary, synagogue, shul, with security, right, protected, or in the homes behind, again, closed doors, private, protected. And, being a Korean immigrant, my mother didn't know what being Jewish meant, right? So this is an invitation for us to reclaim some of the dialogue and messages around what it means to be Jewish, is to be bold and step into vocalizing that at every step of the way. And so we're going to take, we're done. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I do?
Yeah. So we're going to come down and join you. And actually, no, we're not. Oh,
comment?
we're not going to join you. So sorry.
Can I do one comment?
Okay.
On Jew call to action?